If you live long enough, some unusual things are going to happen to you. And I want to tell you about one of them that happened um, back in either 1947 or 1948. And it's St. Patrick's Day today, St. Patrick's Day 2020. This isn't. This didn't happen on St. Patrick's Day. It's happened in the summer of one of those 2 years. And my family used to go to a cabin up in northern Wisconsin that was owned by my grandfather, Pop. We called him Pop. He and his brother, my Uncle Bill, had two kind of cabins that were side by side, and then there was an area between them with a screen porch that they used to meet in the evenings when they were up there, when they spent time up in the mountain, or not in the mountains, but up in the northern woods. And below the cabin, down a little slope, was a rapids. It was probably about maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 feet wide, and real rushing waters right in front of the cabin. And down below it, it opened up a little bit, and the waters ran slower. And up above the rapids, it was also slow because the river was wider. But anyway, we'd go up there and we'd spend a week. My mother and my father and my sister and I. And I think one time she brought her boyfriend along. But this one year, I think it was just our family. Anyway, there is a little pool up above the rapids that we used to use for bathing purposes. And in that pool, we used to keep a couple towels and some ivory soap. Now, ivory soap, people probably don't know about ivory soap anymore, but ivory soap floated. So if you were in a lake or a river or something like that, and you lost the soap, it was easy to find because it was floating on top of the water. So anyway, we had a bar of soap and a towel, and I think we used to take our towel up with us. Don't really remember, it was a long time ago. But anyway, one day I was up there taking a bath, and I was sitting there soaping myself up, standing about, maybe waist deep water, maybe a little lower than that in this particular area. And I soaped myself up really good, and then I dropped down into the water. Skinny dipping, we called it. The boys went up at one time, and the girls went up at another time, and some people soloed. But anyway, this one day, I was taking a bath up there, and I heard off in the woods, I heard this kind of a tap, tap, tapping. I said, what in the heck is that? And after I finished with my bath, and I toweled off, I put my clothes back on, and I started walking through the woods towards the sound of this tap, tap, tapping. And as I got closer, it started getting louder. And I figured, well, I must be going in the right direction. So anyway, pretty soon I came to this clearing. And out in the middle of this clearing, there was this huge tree, and I mean a huge tree. The trunk of the tree was probably, maybe 4 or 5 feet wide. Really large tree. It wasn't very tall, but it lot of branches up in the top and the lower level of the trees, and a lot of leaves up on top of that. But anyway, down below this tree, there's a little hole that went back into the tree, and sitting in front of this hole was a little green man. That's the only way to describe him. He had on a green coat, and green pants, and green shoes, and green socks, and a green hat. And he wasn't green. He was looked kind of like us, although he was only about, I'd say about maybe this tall. I'd give it a couple feet, maybe a couple feet. Anyway, I saw him sitting there, and I said, "Hey, hi!" I waved my hand at him, and bing, like that, he went into the hole of that trunk of the tree, and I walked out there, and I got in front of it, and he also grabbed all of his tools when he jumped into the tree. But strangely enough, you couldn't get into the tree. It was just like the bark of the tree went around, and the tree was there, and it was black, but you push on it and nothing happened. But he had gone into that. I don't know how, but he had done it. So anyway, I went back home, and the next time I went up bathing, I heard the tap tapping again, and I said, well, maybe I'll take another look. So I knew my way by this time. So I wandered through the woods, and when I got over there, I stood and I watched him for a while. And I said, boy, that's one of the strangest people I've ever seen. And I went back and I told my dad about it. My dad's mother was born in County Cork, Ireland. So he knew all of that Irish sort of stuff. And he said, well, what that was a leprechaun. And the leprechaun must have come over on one of the one of the ships from Ireland stowed away someplace and found his way to the North Woods and set up camp. He's probably got a family inside that tree. And he said that he's making shoes for them. I think that's what they usually, the leprechauns are usually shoemakers. And so I said, I absorbed all this and thought about it. And Dad says, another interesting thing about those leprechauns is every single one of them has got a little pot of gold. And if you can catch them, they have to give you their pot of gold. And I said, well, you mean you just say, give me your pot of gold? And he said, oh, no, it's a little more complicated than that. You say, give me your pot of gold, and they'll come up all kinds of excuses of why they shouldn't give you the pot of gold. You know, oh, my mother's been sick, and I've got to take these things to her, and I've got to go to the store and buy some stuff. She's got to go see the doctor, and making all kinds of excuses. But in the end, they have, by the law of the leprechaun, they've got to give their pot of gold to you. So if you hang in there and tell them, I know the rules, give me your pot of gold, he'll have to give it to you. My dad says, but the tough part is to try to catch them because they're pretty hard to catch. So I went back to that woods the next time I heard the tapping, and I tried to slip around to the back. I came in from the other side, but as I was walking across the grass there, it must have rustled a little bit because just like that, he was gone again. So I said, well, that's not going to work. I said, you know, I'll try another little trick. Maybe if I climb up in that tree and sit up there above where he is, I may be able to drop down and snag him. So I said, that sounds like a good idea. So the next time I heard the tapping, when I was up taking a bath, I take that back. The next day, I went to this wooded glen down where this tree was, and I climbed up in the tree and I found myself in some branches right above where he usually sat. And I sat there all afternoon. Pretty soon it got into the evening, no leprechaun. Well, I said, I guess that didn't work, but I'll try it again tomorrow. So I came back the next day and I slipped in very quietly this time. I came in from the back and I crawled up in the tree as quietly as I can. And I sat up there, not making any noise, not moving, just trying to be really quiet. And pretty soon I heard a little rustling down below. And here he comes. That little man walked out from inside the tree and he had a little kind of a thing that shoes fit on. And he was putting new soles on this shoe. It was not a very big shoe. It was about this long. I mean, the leprechaun's only a couple feet tall. So the shoes, and I'm sure that his family, they also had pretty small feet. But anyway, he was working on these shoes. And he worked rather slowly. I don't know whether it was, unless there was a big group of leprechauns down in there, but I just assumed that's what he did. So anyway, I sat up in the tree, and when he looked around a little bit, and then pretty soon he started working on the shoe. And when he started making a lot of noise, I moved over a little bit and I just dropped down into the ground and I grabbed him. He was so small, I had him just like this. I had him around the waist and I'm holding him. And I'm looking him right in the eye. I'm saying, give me your pot of gold. He said, oh, I can't do that. I said, I don't even have my pot of gold here. It's still back in Ireland. And I says, I think you're lying to me. I know you've got a pot of gold and I want you to give it to me. And he said, well, my daughter's been sick and, you know, we got to take her to a doctor. And I says, no, give me the pot of gold. I'm not taking any excuses. Give me the pot of gold. And he said, okay, well, let me go back inside and get it. I said, oh, no, I'm not letting loose of you. I says, you have somebody hand it out because I'm not moving until I get that pot of gold. And sure enough, some hand came out with the pot of gold, went back in. Little man took the pot of gold and he handed it to me. I put him down and I took the pot of gold and I went back to the cabin. And in the cabin, there's like one big room and there's two bedrooms behind the big room. And there was a kitchen over on the left and a dining room table, and then kind of a little grouping of chairs and couches that people would sit in and talk in at the night. And right between the two doors to the two bedrooms, there was kind of a fireplace that had what's the word I'm searching for? A bench, something across it that we had pictures on and stuff like that. And I put the pot of gold up on that what's it called? Well, that went fine. We all went to bed. Next morning, got up, no pot of gold. My dad says, I forgot to tell you something. The leprechauns will come back and steal the pot of gold. So you have to be very careful and figure out a way that they can't get it away from you. So I said, oh, okay. So I went back and I tried my approach for a while. Didn't work. I could not get that leprechaun to come out of the woods. And even when he did, sometimes he just peek outside and look up into the tree to see if I was there. So I gave it up. And we ended our vacation. We were only there a week. We went back home. Well, the next year we came back again. And I went up, I was up taking a bath one day and I heard the tapping. I said, ha, the leprechaun has forgot. So I went through my same routine that I had used before. I went down there early, maybe about noon, 1 o'clock, something like that. And I came around from the back and I crawled across the field there and I crawled up into the tree, being very careful not to move anything. And I found those branches that I had sat on before. And I'm sitting up there. And along about, I'd say about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, here comes the leprechaun. He walks out and he sets his new tool up. He had completely forgotten about me. Anyway, he started working on the shoes. I dropped down. I grabbed him around the waist again. And I said, I got you this time. I says, you're going to have to give me the pot of gold again. And I said, don't even start telling me any excuses because I know what the deal is. You've got to give me the pot of gold. But this year, I don't want the pot of gold in a pot of gold. What I want you to do is put it in my teeth. See there? All that gold is in my teeth. So I said, I want you to put that gold in my teeth. At that time, I didn't have any gold in my teeth. So he said, well, I don't know if I can do that. And I said, oh, sure you can. I said, you leprechauns can do anything. So after, again, a little grumbling, waved a magic wand or something, and bingo, I had a whole bunch of gold in my teeth. The gold's worth a lot of money. But anyway, I got this gold in my mouth, and I've had it there for years and years and years. Well, anyway, we went back, and he couldn't get me then. He couldn't get the gold out of my teeth, and we went back to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, where I lived at the time. And many years later, I went in the Navy. I came back. I got married. We went up to the University of Wisconsin. Came out to Arizona, and one time, I think it was probably in the '60s. I was laying in my bed, and at that time I used to sleep on my back, and I snored. My mouth would kind of drop open, and I'd snore a little bit. And one day while I was laying on my back and snoring a little bit, I felt a little tugging at my mouth, and I gasped, and I sat up, and I see that little green man running out the door. And I reached up in my mouth, and I'm missing a tooth. And I said, I cannot believe that. That guy's got more patience than anybody I've ever seen. And how did he even know we were here? It just didn't make any sense. But anyway, so it was many, many years later. Well, I'm always worried about him coming back. So from now on, I no longer sleep on my back. I sleep on my side. And if I happen to sleep on my back for a while, I always put a pillow to hold my chin shut so you can't get at my teeth. Now, you may not believe this, but I'm going to prove it to you right now. You only got one tooth, but if you look over here in the corner of my mouth, you're going to see where that tooth is missing with the gold. See that right there? That was a tooth that had gold in it. And he's got that back, but I got most of his pot of gold right here in my mouth.